What is it that truly makes a great cinematographer? Most filmmakers, especially when they're just starting out, think that everything has to do with the camera and the gear, but real cinematographers are artists that understand how to tell visual stories that speak to an audience. They know how to control and shape light, and they make something that is extremely complex look effortless and beautiful. Well, today we're going to break down some of my favorite films and shows from 2025 and talk about the genius behind the frame. One of the most impressive films in terms of cinematography and just all around in general this year has been Marty Supreme. The imagery felt grounded, it felt gritty, and more than anything, it had a sense of engineered realism that really made the entire film feel so real. And when you take a closer look at why that is, it almost always comes back to one thing, and that is lighting. At first glance, this shot feels very raw and almost like a documentary, and yet every part of this frame has been carefully shaped. Let's start with the key light. The primary source of light is coming from camera right, roughly 60 degrees off axis and slightly above eye level. Now, this is an aggressive side lighting approach. It's not wrapping around our subject, it's not very flattering, and most importantly, it's not really trying to protect the actor. The direction immediately gives us facial structure, texture in the skin, and emotional tension. When I look at this image, this lighting really just feels like a single motivated source, a window or a doorway or even a practical just out of frame. Now, really quick, let's talk about the quality of light. The quality of light is relatively soft, but it's not diffused to the point where it's beauty lighting. You could still see that it has sweat highlights. There's a sharp transition from light to shadow, which tells you that this isn't an extremely soft source, it's a little bit more of a harder source. Now, the color temperature sits in a very natural range, somewhere between 4300 and 4800 Kelvin, but the camera white balance is set slightly cooler. It keeps a warm skin tone without letting it go too orange, and it allows the shadows to stay a little bit more neutral and grounded. Now, one of the biggest breakthroughs that you can have as a cinematographer is realizing that great lighting is not just about adding more light to the scene, but sometimes it's about controlling and maybe even subtracting the light that's in the space. And a perfect example of really leaning into this approach is the cinematography from Shōgun. Most of the work in this scene is not happening with lights. Now, if we take a look at the behind the scenes images right here, it looks very busy. It looks technical and it looks like a lot is happening. But when you actually start to break it down and you look at the final frame, it feels very simple. A great cinematographer can make something that's very complex feel effortless and natural. Now, the base light here is just overcast daylight that you're getting from the sun and the location. The sky is doing a lot of the work here, but how they start to shape it is with this overhead diffusion that you see in the BTS right here, and that's how they're able to control how much exposure or how much lumens is given off by that skylight. And what that diffusion is doing is it softens any kind of inconsistency and it turns natural light into something that's very predictable. But the real work happens with the negative fill. By placing black solids near the actor, the crew removes any unwanted bounce from the environment and really starts to shape the shadow side of our subject. If you're thinking about this shot in the natural world, you wouldn't get this much shadow. The sunlight would be a little bit more wrapping and it would be a little bit more evenly lit. And like I said, guys, sometimes it's not about adding light. It's about controlling the existing light around you. Now, speaking of control, there's a new AI video generation model that has just been released by Luma AI called Ray 3. And it gives you an impressive amount of creative control over both images and video. Now, I'm not a filmmaker that's totally bought into AI filmmaking is going to replace filmmakers. I just don't believe that's ever going to happen. But I do believe it can really help your workflow and in some cases even save your film. Let me show you guys exactly what I mean. On our last shoot, we missed a detailed macro push-in shot of an investigation board for our last film. The problem was we had only a still photo from our set photographer and we didn't actually shoot anything, which was a huge mistake in production. Now, normally you would have to do one of two things, either spend a ton of money reshooting it or edit around it in post-production and hope that you can make it work. Instead, I brought this image into Dream Machine and used Ray 3 Modify. Used keyframes to define my start and end frames and typed a simple prompt, a slow, deliberate push-in toward the photo of the woman on the board. I made sure to put smooth, controlled movement like it's a dolly, same lighting, same composition. And now within seconds, Ray 3 generated a shot that seamlessly fit into the scene. Another powerful use case is to allow Ray 3 to help you create pitch decks and any kind of storyboards or pre-viz tools. So I took the main character, I took an image from him, and I put it into Ray 3. And then I typed in a prompt, placed the character at a dimly lit office desk. And in just a few seconds, Ray 3 was able to create this. Now, what's impressive about Ray 3 is the flexibility that you can use to generate variations. I could put them in a car, I could put them in an alleyway, or an entirely new location within seconds. And once you guys land on a final image that you love, you could actually use Ray 3 to enhance that image by using Ray 3's Hi-Fi 4K HDR. And if you guys are interested in using Ray 3, I'll drop a link down below. One of the most powerful tools in cinematography is practical and motivated lighting. When the light feels like it belongs in the world of the story, the audience stops thinking about the cinematography or where the light is coming from, and they really just start believing in the scene. A great modern example of this is the cinematography from Sinners. The lighting in this film doesn't call attention to itself. It feels warm, it feels lived in, and it feels emotionally honest. And this scene right here is a perfect example of how that's actually achieved. Practical lighting means the light source exists in the frame. You have things like lamps, bulbs, lanterns, fixtures. Nothing here feels too lit for the camera. It feels like it's lit for the space. If we take a second and we look at the behind the scenes photo, the illusion becomes clear. Now, these overhead lanterns that you see right here are softly diffused, and they're the primary key lights in the scene. They're positioned directly above the actor's head. They're slightly forward and tilted towards the actors. And what this does is that it creates a gentle top-down wrap. Hard overhead light would just feel theatrical and harsh and not really believable. Now, here's the secret sauce that a lot of cinematographers might miss, especially if you're just starting out. The overhead lantern lights are actually not the same color temperature as the practicals in the frame. The overhead lantern lights are likely set to around 43 to 4600 Kelvin. Meanwhile, the background lights are all a much warmer Kelvin. And that's for a very specific reason. Now, if the overhead lantern lights match those practicals in the frame, the actor's skin would start to feel a little bit too orange. But by keeping the overhead lights slightly cooler, what that does is give a nice separation between the background practicals, but also giving a natural skin tone to the actors. Now, something that's also very important to take note here is that the camera white balance is likely set to around 3800 to 4000 Kelvin. As a result, you have these overhead lanterns that feel very natural and soft, and then you have practicals that feel rich and warm, and then you have shadows that are also very controlled and cinematic, and that's what makes great lighting. Now, something else that's very important to note about this frame is look how your attention naturally stays centered. Look at how the space subtly guides your eye without any obvious tricks. And that's because they framed the subject using something called leading lines. Now, leading lines don't just make an image look cinematic and pleasing to the eye. They're actually a quiet way to tell the audience where to look in the scene, and most importantly, how to feel. Look at this first image right here. The environment is massive, the subject is small, and every line pushes your eyes straight towards the center of the frame. The character here isn't just standing in the space, they're being judged by it. Leading lines here reinforce the scale, the authority, and the inevitability of this moment. Now, take a look at this next image right here. The walls, the ceiling lights, the symmetry, everything is closing in on our main character. The leading lines here don't create freedom, they create pressure. Your eye here has nowhere else to look and nowhere else to go but center frame. And this frame feels a little bit more rigid or controlled and almost oppressive. This is composition that's being used to help shape the psychology of the scene. Leading lines are supposed to answer a very simple question. Where do I want my audience to look and to pay attention? And most importantly, how to feel within the space and the scene. Now, if you guys are interested in learning more about cinematography, me and my team are actually wrapping up our filmmaking course right now called Feature Filmmaker, where we break down our entire filmmaking process and bring you guys behind the scenes while we make a real film. And if you guys are interested in that, I'll leave a link down below where you guys can sign up to our email list and you'll be notified as soon as the course drops. I want to thank Luma AI for sponsoring the video, and if you guys are interested in Ray 3, I'll drop a link down below. You guys can check that out. I also want to say thank you so much for stopping in, hanging out with me, and talking about cinematography. I'll see you guys next week. Deuces.